Hi, I'm George Rockett, the CEO of Data Center Dynamics. I'm here with Bruce Taylor, our EVP of North America. Bruce has put on a magnificent conference program for the next 2 days at DCD Enterprise. Is it all in here, Bruce?
It's all in there.
So we've got a show guide. We've got an app that I've just downloaded, and that contains all the information. What I want to know is, what are the highlights for you? What are we going to hear?
Well, I think that something that we started a year ago here in New York has taken a full year's generational leap forward, where we really are talking about the full converged integrated stack, north of the rack, south of the rack, mud to cloud, as I like to say. People who are here are going to hear a lot more about what converged infrastructure really means and what hyperconvergence means. In the past, we've always thought that it didn't include the enterprise class of data centers because of the heterogeneous nature of them, and that more and more is not the case. So the enterprise audiences here is very tuned to this new message and this new way of seeing the infrastructure world.
Okay, so who have you got on the stage? Who's keynoting? Who's kicking off the discussion?
So, as you invented, in fact, this whole notion of the borderlands. So we start off the day hearing from two very different perspectives on what the borderlands means.
So the borderlands being, for us, north and south of the rack, the logical and physical worlds coming together, and there's a bit of grey in the middle that we seem to be talking about more and more.
Right, and there's also the borderlands of what is just beyond the infrastructure, and then how the infrastructure responds to that. So if you think that AI is one of the new, fastest growing, highest interest areas of what the IoT is going to mean in the future, then hearing from IBM Watson on use cases of AI with cognitive computing, right, is a very powerful way to open this conference, because it gives people a sense of what's coming at them faster than they can even imagine.
So the data deluge and what's out there and how we sift through it from an infrastructure perspective too, how this is going to manage what you do.
Absolutely, and what's the infrastructure that it's going to take to actually operate this, right? So then the second keynote of the day, another plenary keynote, is Robert Scoble.
I'm really interested in seeing that. I've read a lot of his blogs.
Yeah,
a lot of the stuff that he publishes, really, really futuristic.
He's one of the top-rated tech journalists in the world. He's a fabulous public presenter. He was the futurist at Rackspace for quite some period of time, and now he has moved over to the virtual reality and augmented reality side. So there, with Watson on the one end with AI, and with Scoble at the other end, and talking about what's coming in virtual reality, we get two very powerful messages right on the front end of the conference about what the borderlands are.
Now, looking at your little book here, it is DCD Enterprise. We are in New York, arguably, I think, the world's second largest data center market, if we count Japan as the first. New York and the tri-state area is the second. Banks everywhere. I've seen up there, you've got Brian Saluzzo from American Express, Nick Barnes from Bank of America. We've got representation from Citi, and
Grant Richard from Goldman.
Yeah, they're the guys that have been doing a lot of the OCP stuff.
Right.
Okay, so are there any big trends to see out there and what they're talking about? What's the new big thing that the big financial institutions are talking about in the data center?
Well, actually, I don't think that they're talking any more than they were perhaps a year ago about the steady movement toward open source. So in the past, we probably have assumed that banks would be one of the last industries to move to open source. Not so, right? The banks are actually in the forefront of making the necessary investments for what it is to be a true hyper-converged, open source, full stack data center.
It's interesting, isn't it?
It is.
How quickly they've kind of like adopted these ideas. We've got the guy coming down from Bloomberg, Mr. Ehrenkrantz.
Right.
He's looking at building his own servers and engaging with the infrastructure in a whole new way.
Right.
So.
And what's interesting is that just like with everything, it all depends. Some people will choose colo, right, as their expression of how they want to expand themselves into the cloud and into hyperconvergence. Other people will say, we're going to build this ourselves, we can now do it. The economic feasibility is there. We no longer have to think about moving necessarily to colo in order to hybrid cloud. So, the kinds of, the way that people have to think about these things is changing dramatically. And it really becomes around being workload centric. We used to say app centric, but it's really workload centric rather than being data center centric.
So we've got Brent Eubanks talking about just this subject. He's with Live Nation Ticketmaster.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And and he really has taken it out to the edge, even with artificial intelligence involved in how now they will source and manage the life cycle of the workload, right? Entirely software defined.
Wow. So we've got this amazing schedule filled up for 2 days, but that's not all we've got, have we? You'll see behind us they're setting up the expo floor. Over 100 exhibitors are involved here. We've got, you can see down there, Raging Wire, I think Schneider, our headline sponsors, setting up in the centre of the show floor behind me. Who else can I see? I can see Equinix down there, East Penn, North Star, all sorts of companies. It's going to be very, very exciting.
We're sitting in the CenturyLink Lounge, what will be the lounge.
We are in the CenturyLink 360 Networking Lounge, where we're going to be doing interviews from here all day long. So that's the expo. We've covered the conference. There are a few.
Let's talk about who's coming. Right? I mean, that's where this really gets interesting, don't you think? It's you led this, and I have to say it's been a brilliant stroke.
Thank you.
We have what people don't know is that over the course of the year, we have entirely changed the complexion of who attends this audience. Now it is much more IT side of the stack, right? It's everybody, but the IT stack is very well represented,
I think
higher quality than ever.
50% of the people here consider themselves IT people involved in the data center.
Right.
That's a real change.
Right. And the seniority of these people has changed remarkably over any previous DCD event.
Yeah.
So the kinds of conversations people are going to have a very different quality than anything I think we've seen before.
I think we'll see over the next couple of days, but yeah, the demographic information that we've been able to get shows that we've got very senior people, and they are working on live projects, all nature of live projects at the moment.
Right.
All self kind of like data they've given up themselves, but it shows that this is very vibrant New York at the minute. With all of these changes, companies are having to invest in new hardware, new infrastructure on a monthly basis, which I don't think they were thinking about 24 months ago. I don't think they thought that a market was going to be like this.
Right. And something that people won't be aware of that's going on is over the course of the 2 days, we have some very senior level, what we call boardroom conversations.
Okay.
And the idea behind these is to take on a big idea. So as an example, one of the ones that will be very prominent, that we've got a terrific group of people to consider is, are we smoking something funny when we think that we're going to ever have the true software-defined data center? What is the roadmap? How realistic is it? Where are we on the journey, right?
Yeah.
Very senior people talking about things like this, and then as the final keynote of the entire conference, they'll report out their points of agreement.
So what other? We've got other DCD boardroom discussions as well. We're looking at whether sustainability and energy efficiency, or the highest form of sustainability, is back on the corporate agenda.
Right.
And we're road testing that in New York. So many corporate headquarters here. Do they give a damn about this?
Right.
Are they being forced into giving a damn about this? We've had COP21. We've got all of this press around the environment back on. I thought it had gone.
Right.
For the last 3 years. Kind of like went with the with the crashing oil price. No one cared. But is it back on the agenda?
Oh, I think it absolutely has to be back on the agenda. As we look ahead to our web scale event in San Jose and to Zeta Structure in London, If computing continues to grow at the rate that it's growing, the world will run out of power. And it will run out of power relatively soon, like around 2025. Right?
Yeah, that was our good friend Roger Struckhoff's cigarette packet calculation, wasn't it?
Right.
Was it by 2030, the data, to process the data consumed in the world with the technology that we use today, would consume all the power in the world.
Right.
I get challenged on that number, and I say, look, it's the back of a cigarette packet. It's just trying to show that we've got a problem here.
Right, that's exactly right. And it's now time to start actually talking about this in a concrete way, because we want the Zeta structure, the zettabyte era, to happen, because it's how we solve the world's problems, right?
Yeah.
It's how we advance economic justice in the world and other things as well. However, you've got to be able to do it. And the data center industry and the cloud infrastructure industry is where that all happens. It doesn't happen anywhere else.
You might be able to say that the industry is becoming sexy. Much more interesting before explaining to people, what is it that you do? What are these events about? They're about data centers. What's that?
It's taken a long time, but I'm finally sexy. I've been waiting.
Now, we could go on for ages. We've got 48 hours to get through, so if you've got to the end of this this little interview with George and Bruce, congratulations. There's going to be a whole lot more information if you come down tomorrow and the day after. That's tomorrow, the 19th of April, and we are at the Marriott Marquis in Times Square, DCD Enterprise. Be at the table, not on the menu. Thanks a lot.
Excellent. Thank you.